Hey, it's always interesting when media tells stories of modern technology and futuristic advancements, because it often ends up aging poorly or in funny ways. Hanna-Barbera's The Jetsons is a classic look at this kind of situation, taking place only 37 years from the current time, but obviously we will not actually be living like that the way it seems so far back when it was made. It's just as interesting to look back at media from the 2000s with different commentary on technologies, especially with how much society was changing by implementing it more and more during this time. Scooby-Doo just so happened to have an ongoing series at the start of the decade, and there are two episodes I thought might be fun for us to look back at and see how technology was being presented now over 20 years ago. I know, I don't like thinking about these episodes being over 20 years old either. There are a lot of interesting film and pop culture references in these episodes, as is often the case, as well, and these are ones that just stick out to me in general when I think of our current series for the day. What's new, Scooby-Doo? We might even find some things that remain culturally relevant now in a world where the fear of AI taking over is becoming a part of daily life. Today, we're looking at It's Mean, It's Green, It's the Mystery Machine from the first season, and High-Tech House of Horrors from the second. Let's get cracking with this 2000s nostalgia dose. What's New, Scooby-Doo Season 1, Episode 5. It's Mean, It's Green, It's the Mystery Machine. Originally aired October 26, 2002. Wow, 23 years ago. One thing to note right off the bat, these two particular animation studios handled this episode, and it came out a little wonky to say the least. It's almost in another animation style from the rest of the series and consistently off-model, which I never noticed before, so that should be fun. To start, the boys are heading back from seeing a movie, much like the original debut episode of the series in 1969, so even if it's 2002, not much has changed. As they continue down the street, the mystery machine is oddly sitting out, then seemingly comes to life on its own, the boys innocently thinking it's Fred. They realize their mistake as it speeds around to flash its green lights in their faces, attempting to run them down. The idea of a car coming to life isn't new. You of course have innocent ones like the Love Bug, or for a haunting and deep cut, My Mother the Car. I reckon we're more in the antagonistic haunt territory here though, of which the 1983 Stephen King novel Christine, and the film adaptation by John Carpenter, are probably the most iconic haunted car story. I think that's what the episode is more so going for. Continuing to launch us into the 2000s, rather than the classic malt shop, the gang are hanging in a more modern smoothie shop. The boys run in terrified, telling the others exactly what happened. Fred supposes he left the parking brake off, but the boys know what they saw. However, the van is right where Fred left it, seeming untouched. They head off for the night casually, but suddenly the green headlights turn on again, and Fred loses total control of it while they almost veer off the cliff and head straight for a death jump. Scooby remembers the parachute they have for some reason, but I guess this is the reason, stopping them just in time. For real, look at how melty they are here, it's kind of cool. They pay a visit to Murph, their mechanic, who says the van was perfect when it left. To try and make them happy though, he offers to buy the mystery machine. Side note, Murph is kind of hot. Is that weird? Speaking of 2000s, his voice actor narrated some episodes of E! True Hollywood Story.
What would we ever do without the mystery machine?
Get a mystery SUV?
Scooby points out to Shaggy that the van is on the move again, but the others just take it as someone stealing it. The van started leaking oil after last night though, so they have a trail. They follow it to a dead end, needing to find out who lives here.
Using my wireless internet connection, I'll do a reverse search on the address. Huh?
Holy 2000s, bro! They meet Susan Dinwiddie, voiced by Kath Soucie, who does sometimes voice young people like Phil and Lil, but mostly is every mom under the sun like Susan. Think Danny Phantom's mom Maddie, or Kanga. She's busy teaching a student who's playing a sour note. She has a ton of memorabilia of former pop band The Mystery Kids, and it turns out she's their mom. In fact, the entire family is a pretty obvious parody of the fictitious musical family from the 1970 sitcom The Partridge Family. Just like The Mystery Kids, the Partridge Family were in a pop band. And even more specifically, Susan looks a lot like Mrs. Partridge's design from the 1974 Hanna-Barbera animated spin-off Partridge Family 2200 AD, which is very much Jetsons-like and right in the territory of what we're talking about. Thelma inquires about their missing van, the Mystery Machine, which seems to send a chill down Susan's back. She gives us some new canon backstory, that the Mystery Machine originally was their tour bus when they were starting, named after their Mystery Kids moniker. We're introduced to them, speaking of, Andy and Mandy now being moody teens. Fun fact, Mandy was originally going to have a celebrity guest voice, meant to be Lindsay Lohan. She ended up turning down the role because she was busy with the 2003 Disney film Freaky Friday. And even freakier, the sequel was released this very a year 22 years later. The siblings are surprised to hear the van is still running, and Fred asks if they can tell them more about it. Susan says it was technically owned by their keyboard player, Flash Flanagan, who has unfortunately passed away. Shaggy realizes the ghost of Flash must be haunting the van, which Mandy says was his home away from home. Turns out the flowers weren't Fred's idea, all Flash to remind him of his garden. Definitely not canon to the Flower Power original. They bump into Randy, Andy and Mandy's brother, dropping a book for flight engineering, though he seems irritable, and they wonder why Susan didn't mention having another son. After walking all day, the gang is pretty tired, and right on time, the green glowing van turns the corner. It tries to run them down, Velma dropping her laptop she was not holding in the prior shot, now destroyed by the van, and they find themselves cornered. Fred sees a fire escape ladder, tosses a box of Scooby snacks so Scoob will pull it down, and they just barely make it up as the van rams the building.
Well, like I hate to say we told you so, but...
We told you so.
The van now remains disfigured, almost as if it has a wicked grin on the front, and the others have no choice but to believe. Fred stuffs everyone in a taxi, but they lose it and find themselves at the technical academy that Randy goes to. They ask him if he knows anything, but he says he never had anything to do with the mystery kids. He's just their tone-deaf brother who doesn't count. He then shows Velma that he doesn't need any control panels for the robots he's been working on. He can control them from anywhere using the magic of wireless internet technology. Daphne says his mom must be proud, and though she helps with homework, he feels she only pretends to be interested and only cares about her other two kids. Fred asks him what he'd do in this situation, and he says he'd find a good mechanic, so back we go. But in this shot, you can accidentally see some white on the edge that we aren't meant to be seeing. Daphne notes this didn't start until they got the van back from Murph, and Velma finds it odd he wanted to buy it. Inside the shop further, they find a room that's basically a shrine to the mystery kids. You can see another white edge in this shot, you get the point. He's got costumes, candy, all the memorabilia ever. They turn on the TV and find a TV special, not unlike a true Hollywood story, really, about the rise and fall of the band. It starts with the infamous night Flash Flanagan stormed off and died, but also tells us that each week a wild daisy appears on his headstone, either from a fan or from Flash himself. That means they need to check out his grave. Thankfully, Murph has a ton of mystery kids' bikes and scooters and skates and skateboards. When they arrive, they see Andy and Mandy already there, but suddenly they hear haunting mystery kids music as the van heads down the road. We end up in a graveyard chase, Velma even classically losing her glasses.
I'd do anything to hold you in my arms.
Love this song. It really does feel perfectly 2000s. Not a good end to the chase though, as the van abducts Shaggy. They chase after, Fred jumping on top, while Shaggy hops in the front, and they head the wrong way down the highway. Shaggy pulls Fred in while a cop pulls them over, the van stopping just in time to make them look bad. The others explain and get him to call it a malfunction, but he has to impound the van. Andy and Mandy, meanwhile, are practicing, and the gang are surprised to see Randy as well, forced by his mom to set up a wireless control light display. They're forced off stage by Susan, and join Murph, who offers again to take the van off their hands, but they reveal they now know why he wants the mystery machine so bad. Man, he really is super cute though. His obsessive love for the band just makes him hotter. A light suddenly crashes on stage, and Randy's siblings blame him for trying to hurt them. But if not Randy, who did do it? Shaggy thinks the spirit of Flash, which gives Velma the idea to have Daphne conduct a seance.
A seance is where you contact spirits from beyond the grave.
Meanwhile, at the impound lot, the van comes to glowing green life, escaping out the gate. At the seance, Madame Daphne comes out to make contact with the other side.
Where did you learn to contact spirits?
An infomercial on the Psychic Channel.
She even makes the spirits rise the table up.
Thank you, spirits.
You're welcome.
The spirits being Shaggy and Scooby under the table, mind you. Shaggy providing the voice of Flash, Daphne asks him who corrupted the van.
Andy or Mandy to hype the mystery kids?
Randy for revenge against his siblings, or Murph to get them to sell. Just in time, the haunted van shows up before them, enough to scare the boys out, then getting chased around. Velma drops a lead-lined cover over the van, stopping wireless commands from controlling it, and Fred exposes who was trying to send those commands right here. Susan, using a laptop under the table. She wanted her kids back on top, so she came up with this publicity stunt. That's why she helped Randy with homework, to learn how to do this, which is kind of messed up of her. When the van was at Murph's for repairs, she added a webcam and receiver in the dash, able to control it from anywhere. Scooby takes the laptop to show it off, until the glow returns, turning out to be Christmas lights hooked into the battery. Daphne asks why Andy and Mandy were at Flash's grave before, and they explain he was their hero and just really missed him while trying to revive the band. Velma's favorite clue is the music that played whenever the van came to life, the same sour note they heard her student make days before. ever. And an interesting Easter egg here, the music score turns into some of the iconic Ted Nichols score from Scooby-Doo Where Are You?
That means she must have recorded that eerie score and not Flash Flanagan.
Well, I never meant for the van to get so out of control, but you kids wouldn't stop meddling. It doesn't matter, though. The mystery kids are still gonna be bigger than ever.
Her kids, however, decide if this is what it takes to be famous, they're happier as has-beens, and apologize to Randy. Fred's happy to have the van back, while Murph offers another $8,000 for it, but it's not for sale, so he wonders if the kids still want the instruments they ditched. To celebrate, they take the van to a drive-in movie, then get a spook when the van seems to come back to life and chase them.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
And that's its mean, it's green, it's the Mystery Machine! Now that is definitely how you kick off looking at how this show utilized the fact that it's set in the 2000s, and that the gang suddenly have technology at their fingertips. Not only do you have that perfect music during the chase sequence to really set the feel of the decade, but for once there's no villain to technically be unmasked, literally, because technology is the villain. Or being used in a negative way at least. Obviously Susan is the villain. Every 5 seconds someone is bringing up a laptop, or wireless internet, or controlling technology in some wireless way, leading up to the reveal that the van is being controlled using a wireless connection. You can't get that in 1969, that's for sure. And yet you do still have those ties to the 70s in particular, sort of putting things in an in-between state, as the plot centers around a Partridge Family parody that's a lot more dated these days than it was even in the 2000s. I do love the centering, however, of a former band and a mystery surrounding the end of things. Having the True Hollywood Story kind of feature about them, and even having a narrator of that show voice a character in the episode, really does authenticate the period. If Lindsay Lohan had been Mandy as planned, that would have just sealed this as the most 2000s episode to ever exist. This is definitely an episode I tend to remember, and now I see why after refreshing myself on it. It really holds up as a fun episode. Even the seance that they have not only brings something different to such a technology-focused episode, but ties into the spooky factor of Flash potentially haunting the van and the mystery of what's going on at his grave. This episode also really doesn't hold back from making Susan a shitty person. She's obviously forcing her 2 children, who she clearly considers more important because they make money, to return to music when they don't really want to. But even worse, Randy says that he feels his mom only helps him with his homework and pretends to be interested in his life. And it turns out it really is true. She's a shitty mom who is only helping him so that she can learn how to operate the technology for this publicity stunt. And what even is this publicity stunt? What publicity did she get out of it? I didn't see anybody reporting about the van coming to life, only it chasing the gang. Maybe she had other plans that she didn't get to execute yet. Kath Sosi normally is really loving moms. Again, Kanga. So it's kind of subversive to make her such a terrible mother this time. Murph turning out to be a super fan and nerd when it comes to the band is also a nice twist that I find really endearing. I wish he had shown up again, but alas. The animation, as we knew going in, is kind of melty, and I find it really adds so much more character to the show rather than it being extremely on model and perfect. Really feeling like people drew this with their hands. It's another thing that makes this episode stand out as memorable when you take notice. It's such a fun and interesting time capsule, and I'm glad that we have it. Obviously though, we have another that I'd really like to take a look at, so let's get into that one now. What's New, Scooby-Doo? Season 2, Episode 5, High-Tech House of Horrors, also known as High-Tech House of the Future on home video and digital for some reason. Originally aired October 4th, 2003. Again, wow, 22 years ago. This show felt so modern and new back then. As a tease for what we're up against, this episode has a lot in common with the X-Files episode Ghost in the Machine, which is fitting, as that's one of the shows I have on in the back while editing lately. We open up with the titular House of the Future, a group being told by Dr. Laszlo Ostwald that its name is Super House of Artificial Robotic Intelligence, or Sherry for short. Already, we're being set up for Sherry to be a parody of HAL 9000 from 2001, A Space Odyssey, which is a low-hanging fruit, but everyone was doing it back then, even Reba. Who can blame them? It was literally the time of 2001 around then. This also reminds me fittingly of classic 1999 DCOM Smart House. Love that movie. Additionally, Professor Oswald here is one of the few recurring characters of What's New, and that he appears twice. One more time in the 3rd season episode E-Scream. However, voice actor Dave Foley here does not return. James Arnold Taylor taking over in E-Scream instead. A girl, Janie, separates to check her makeup, and her outfit is for sure pure 2000s here. Someone seems to be spying on her. A fright in the mirror and the water turning on to flood the room. Janie being locked in. Professor Oswald tries to override Sherry, but it only laughs. Janie being left to drown. Talk about a cold open. The gang meanwhile are on their way here to the Omaha World's Fair, finding the car of the future, House of the Future, and for the boys, the International Food Court. While they rig it to get all the food, Fred checks out the Jetsons' best futuristic car, going wild and running into the boys. There's also a magical makeover machine of the future, which, alright, so Daphne forces Velma into that, and boy does it give a makeover.
Wow, I'm hot.
Daphne goes in, and it does literally nothing, because why would Daphne need anything changed? Love the makeup just being gone with a hair toss. They finally all make it to the house of the future. The guy's still dizzy from their little ride around the World's Fair. Daphne wonders why the most popular attraction is deserted, and Velma realizes it's closed indefinitely. 2 kids run out, saying that it tried to kill them.
That's silly. A house couldn't do that. Not unless it was
Haunted!
Professor Oswald shows up to try and dispel this, the boys shutting it out as well.
And now I will tell you, and you, and you, and you can tell him later.
He tells them Sherry has the most advanced AI in the world, the first computer that thinks for itself. He then shows a laser cut a watermelon and even removed the seeds. Sherry seemingly watching the boys separate. They put a giant burrito in the gamma ray oven, but rather than it heating up, it's the boys instead who are cooking. A robot trying to stop Scooby. Fred activates a lifelike hologram, while Professor Oswald shows he can communicate and monitor every part of the house from his watch. The boys run in and tell the others as they fall onto a vibrating couch, disturbed by the robot offering a drink. Daphne finds him harmless, and Professor Oswald explains it, named Jeeves, to basically be the butler. Jeeves being a name that became popular after P.T. Woodhouse's short stories and novels about a character named Jeeves who was an especially amazing valet. Not a butler specifically, as so many parodies tend to be. Even more fitting for this age of tech, Ask Jeeves was basically Google before Google made it irrelevant and Ask.com ditched the name. They gang head out for the night, only to realize Daphne is missing, perhaps left in the house. They head back in, now locked inside, and Scooby gets a bad shock when he tries to hack it, leading Velma to get knocked into another opening that Sherry opens. On a bunch of screens they find down there, they discover Daphne is locked away somewhere, believing herself to be inside the computer. They lose connection as Sherry laughs at them. The others fall in line with splitting up before Fred can say it, leaving him at a loss for words. The boys already get scared out of one area by the evil laugh, while Velma notices some wires were resoldered recently, still warm. This suggests they aren't alone in a possible more human touch to this mystery. 2 men, meanwhile, are being chased by bug-like nanobots, the scares turning into a slide for everyone, and Fred gets the bots to run into the door and electrocute themselves. Fred realizes the showy guy is Horatio Hidalgo, host of Scare Factor. His charm, however, is lost on Velma. He's here because he heard of the missing girl, not Daphne, but Janie, who disappeared several days ago. The boys are excited to see Daphne until they see another and many more of her, all holograms. The house then mockingly laughs at them to rub it in. Fred and Velma find Billy, one of the kids from before, strapped down and about to be killed by this laser, a reference to the James Bond film Goldfinger. Turns out it's a joke by his older brother Bobby. Interestingly, he's voiced by Pamela Adlon, who you might know best for a different Bobby Hill from King of the Hill. Fitting again, as it's the other show I've been watching while I work on videos lately. The boys came back in to screw with each other more, and Fred expects they could be behind all this in an attempt to scare each other. Velma then remembers Professor Oswald's watch, and wakes him up trying to get help, but they're disconnected. Elsewhere, Jeeves gives another drink to the boys, but this time he's not so friendly, picking them up and dumping them with the trash.
And I thought my room smelled bad.
Suddenly the compactor turns on, and while it might give Star Wars for some, I'm personally having Final Destination Bloodlines flashbacks. As the walls close in, they scream for their lives, heard by the other 2, but it seems too late. Of course, they're fine with how many tight spaces they've hid in. Velma notices something and runs down the hall, finding both Daphne and Janie being held in here, a force field in place. Velma plugs into the central computer directly, but the house is displeased and turns on the waterworks to destroy her tech. She hacks it to change the rain to snow and frees the girls, which means it's time to get out. But here comes Jeeves. We get our musical chase sequence here. For once, some instrumental techno music, which is surprising but fitting. They stumble in front of Horatio, and Velma considers he'd do anything to get footage for his show. They realize Jeeves is welding the door shut to keep them in forever, but Velma believes she has this one wrapped, just needing to catch the robot. She even has some fancy new and improved Scooby snacks to convince the boys. Scoob comes out in robot drag so he can be sexy and lure out Jeeves, and when it works, Daphne sets him off on a conveyor belt, sending him into the bathroom, which Fred locks as the water starts flooding it again. It of course makes him malfunction, and he floats out. Fred tries to unmask it, but there's nobody, just a robot, which means if it's none of us in a suit, Professor Oswald might be behind this as the only one who can control the computer. Velma points out his connection to the watch went out earlier, however, so it can't be him even if he wanted to do it. As it turns out, the culprit is not a who, but a what? The house itself. It then laughs, voiced by Hex Girl herself, Jennifer Hale, bragging about about doing all of this. She's bitter Professor Oswald took the credit when she's the one who does everything and deserves attention, and she plans on getting it. She tries to psych them out, but Velma talks everyone into doing nothing and giving her no attention. Sherry begs them for attention until her malfunction turns into chaos, destroying herself for the attention. I know how that feels. It trapped and attacked because that's all it wanted, and when it couldn't get it, it shut down. Literally me. All safe the next day, Shaggy enjoys some weird genetically modified horseradish with the kids, only for Jeeves to pop up and scare him. But of course...
Scooby-Doo!
And that's High-Tech House of Horrors, or whatever you call it. This one actually feels almost less original than the previous episode, even though that one's clearly a take on stories like Christine. You really do just have so many stories already like Smart House, though. This episode feels like it's almost copy-pasted from that movie in a lot of ways. And again, there were so many parodies of Hal during this time specifically. It doesn't take away from the episode too much, however, or make it less memorable. As alluded to, there's a lot in this episode that's still fairly relevant over 20 years later. AI is becoming more and more of a conversation every day of our lives, as it starts to take jobs and destroy the environment with every ChatGPT interaction. Even though we still aren't in the world presented in the House of the Future at the World's Fair just yet, we are getting dangerously close to some of it when it comes to how AI is in everything, down to our refrigerators. There should be real worry about how much we rely on technology more than ever decades removed from this episode, because the slightest malfunction on the wrong thing could set us back for the entire day or more at this point. Sherry is an exaggeration, but the horror of Hal that she presents, the potential danger that AI could do to us if something goes wrong, is becoming more and more of a real threat than some of the villains that Scooby comes across. As much as this episode feels unoriginal sometimes, it's almost more grounded than some of the other villain reveals just because in 2025, you might be more likely to run into a Sherry than a guy in a Phantom costume. Horatio feels like a wasted aspect of the episode. He shows up to be the butt of the joke with his show and a red herring to make us think he's controlling the house, but he's ultimately just a waste of time and does nothing of importance. I think that character concept could have actually been a lot more interesting and better used with some type of commentary. At best, you get the suggestion of how fake that type of reality show is, and that is indeed very 2000s, but it's pretty weak in execution. The scene with Bobby and the laser is kind of crazy. He even admits he was trying to hurt his brother at least a little bit. Like, that is messed up. Janie meanwhile made for a pretty shocking cold open, as until we find out she's safe with Daphne much later, the suggestion that she might have actually been killed by the house is pretty surprising for a fairly tame show. The last of our major characters, the Professor, also doesn't necessarily leave that much of a mark, so it's kind of surprising that he's one of our few recurring characters. I would consider talking about his other appearance, which is also the series finale. I didn't think it quite fit our little double feature here as well. I think one of the most memorable moments of the episode has always weirdly been the makeover scene, and how Velma comes out of that. I've always found that part really funny. As much as I've kind of dogged on the episode here, it really has stayed one of the other highly memorable episodes of this particular series for me, and I think it does still hold up. If anything, as we've covered, the moral and heart of the story about AI is really more relevant than ever 2 decades later. Even viewing it from a 2000s technology perspective, it's not really all that out there. Maybe you should be worried about your own Sherry and what she might do to you tomorrow. I think that's all I have to say about this one though, so let's wrap it up before the AI takes over and decides I'm no longer necessary here. Well, that's Scooby-Doo's 2000s technological terror. Being firmly in the mid-2020s, it's wild to look back at the 2000s and see technology that was still considered new and needed to be explained. Nobody now is giving exposition about what a wireless connection is for their laptop every few seconds in case somebody doesn't know what that is. Most Scooby shows are very much time capsules of when they came out, like the original being so incredibly stuck in the 60s and 70s to the point that it's got the whole franchise sort of stuck there at times. This series is very much stuck in the 2000s in the same way, and it's for sure technology that dates it the most and screams that this came out in 2002. But even just the pop culture references, the music choices of everything, this show is pure representation of the decade. And as someone that grew up with this show during that time, it does make it sort of strange and fun to revisit, because it puts you right back into being a child and watching these episodes for the first time. Some of them, of course, are more dated than others. You can find an episode of this show that could have easily been made yesterday, such as the one I covered in the previous video, but the Mystery Machine episode is definitely one of those that is far more dated than some. The House of Horrors, however, could probably be mostly made yesterday and feel like it's current and a relevant story, and that's always a silly little balance that you can find when going through the different episodes of this. If you're feeling nostalgic for this particular decade, especially the early part, this is definitely a good show to watch, and some good episodes to start with. I haven't talked about this particular series beyond the movies all that often, especially because the YouTube copyright with them is a nightmare. The previous video had like a full minute over chunks throughout the whole thing that they just wanted to block, which is kind of ridiculous, but I'd like to jump through through those hoops more often and talk about it sometimes, because it really was a core part of my childhood, and I'm sure that's the same for a lot of you. I hope you liked having a little double feature of episodes today, and if you missed the last video talking about a first season episode, definitely go watch that one, or any of the others I made recently. There's a big backlog to take in. Whichever one you choose, I'll see you there. Bye!